In the past few weeks, we have explored the doctrine of the Bible. We've explored the doctrine of God. Today, we're going to explore the doctrine of human beings. Now, how human beings are defined determines a lot how they behave and how they treat one another. Catch this, this is extremely important. How human beings are defined determines, to a large extent, A, how they behave, and B, how they treat one another. You see, if we view ourselves as animals, then we will behave and treat one another like animals. Now, I remember my first time in biology class when the biology teacher said, "We're nothing but animals." Okay? Now, there's a truth there. Okay? The problem is that we're dealing with an atheistic, evolutionary definition of human beings that says we are nothing more than animals. Okay? Now, is it when we start and say that we are just animals, how are people going to behave? How are people behaving? I'll give you the best example I have. To me, it's an embarrassment on my generation. Woodstock. I remember I'm sure those of you that are young have read about it, and you've heard all these glowing terms about what a great rock festival it was. But the reports that came out of Woodstock were this. It was nothing but a bunch of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. People were literally, it rained there, they were literally fornicating in the mud just like pigs. And we have politicians who want to build a monument out there. Okay? Come on. Come on, come on, come on. Okay? And that's what happens. Now we have to understand, you know, there is a side of us that's an animal side, and we need to understand that. But if that's how we define human beings, is it any wonder that we take and we teach our children in school there's no God, you don't have anything else with it, you're just an animal, and so when they get out, they act like animals. Okay, so this is a pretty important doctrine, okay? On the other hand, if we believe that we possess a dignity that sets us apart from the rest of creation, our lives acquire an intrinsic worth. What's that mean? It resides in us. Now, our framers of our Declaration of Independence understood that. And they've put in there that all men are created equal and are endowed with certain inalienable rights from their Creator, not government. Please hear that. I've come to the point I am so angry that government's trying to give me my rights. Government had nothing to do with it. God did. Amen. And human beings were endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, which include, but are not limited to, life, liberty. Quit trying to enslave me with your taxes. Liberty and the pursuit of happiness. You mean you're not going to tell me what I can do to be happy? No. Well, I want to go to McDonald's and I want to drink a gallon of Coke. Well, that's bad for you. I don't care. You want to live with the problems? You can live with them, but I'm not going to stop you. That's what makes you happy. Go do it. Joe, did I just get myself in trouble? Okay? Are we beginning to understand the necessity of this and where we are? Okay, let's jump into it then. The Bible says that we were created in the image of God. Now, here we go. Then the Lord said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let him rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, over the livestock, over the earth, over all the creatures that move on the ground. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Wow. Did you catch the verse on the front of the bulletin where David said that you created man a little lower than God? Well, the King James says angels. Yeah, but that word that they translate angels is Elohim, God. We were made in the image of God. Whoa! You didn't know you were that important, did you? Come on. Come on. We live in a time when people want to just demolish people's self-esteem around them, and they say terrible things and whatever, and just knock down whatever self-confidence they are. Please understand, I don't care what anybody says about you. You were created and are created in the very image of God.
Amen. Amen.
Pastor John, how do you know this? If you only knew when I was growing up how many times I was told how stupid I was. How many times I was given humiliating nicknames. Okay? Who, when I was coming up and growing up and coming to the point of college, was thought that I just couldn't do much of anything. But God took me through a process, and he let me know that I'd been lied to all my life. No, I don't have the intelligence of Einstein. I've got the intelligence of John Miller. And that's what God wanted me to have.
Amen.
No, I don't have the body of Arnold Schwarzenegger. I have it more like,
John Miller.
John Miller. He got it! We see, God made us. And he loves us because he made us. Did you ever put a lot of effort into a project, and when you got done, you were proud of it? When God got done making human beings, he didn't say it was good. He said it was very good. And you, when you were created, God said, yep, very good. Well, I'm not beautiful like, says who? Says who? You're beautiful in the eyes of the Lord.
Amen.
Well, I don't care. Let me teach you something about beauty that you need to know. Beauty is something that starts on the inside. And it works its way out. I'm going to tell you something. I've met a lot of people that were very careful about their body, but they are so ugly on the inside. They may have had looks, but they weren't beautiful by any stretch of the imagination. Tomorrow morning, when you get up, go to look in the mirror, go to shave, go to comb your hair, do whatever you do in front of the mirror, I want you to say, I'm beautiful because God made me beautiful.
Amen.
That's not baloney, folks. We've lived in a world that has tried to turn us into animals so that they can destroy God and Christianity. And we've got to understand that that while, yes, God did make us a little lower than God, we do have animal characteristics. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But we were created in God's image. Now, what does that mean? What's it mean we were created in the image of God? Well, the first thing it means, we look like Him. I don't know about you, but when I'm in Myers lots of times, I literally have to smile. Because as I go down the aisles, I see mothers and their daughters. You ever see it? They look like one another. They walk like one another. They chat like one another. They're just a spitting image of one another. Same way you get guys. Get the boys with their dad. The other day, there's a little boy that the teachers have all kinds of trouble with because he's a bundle of energy. He doesn't get off the bus. He runs off the bus. And the teacher, you get back there and walk. You get back there and walk. Yesterday, Friday I guess it was, I was picking the kids up. And this little guy rips off the bus. And he said, my dad's here. He goes, jumps into the truck next to me, and I said, yep, that's your dad. We look like him, right? We often say, well, as long as she's alive, you'll never be dead. Correct? So you look like God. There's things about you that look like God. Children look like their parents. However, the image of God is not in our bodies. I have a hard time believing God's fat, but but God is a spirit. Okay, so we know the image of God is not 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, whatever, okay? God's a spirit. So when we start looking for the image of God, so that when people look at us and they say, oh, that's what God looks like, we're going to look for spiritual qualities, right? Okay. So if you remember back a few weeks ago when we started talking about the doctrine of God, we talked about His transcendence, His dynamism. That dynamism means that He works and He's active and whatever, and His goodness. They're not the same in us, just like when we're kids. They aren't the same, but they look a lot like God's. Okay? So let's take a look at this. Let's do it. First of all, the image is transcendence. The image of transcendence. Now, what transcendence means it's above and beyond. Remember we talked about God's transcendence in terms of omnipotence, omnipresence, and omniscience. All-knowing, all-powerful, everywhere present. Okay? And of course that's not us, but we transcend. But we need to understand that part of the reason why we reflect the image of God, did you notice that when God said, let us make man, unlike every other creature that were spoken into existence, we go to the second chapter of Genesis, and God said, first of all, He made him from the dust of the ground. We were different. God took time to sculpture us. Isn't that amazing? God took time. And then, not only that, but here's the bigger thing. To make sure that we have an idea of oneness and that gets together. When it came time to make the woman, He didn't scoop up a bunch of dirt and make her. He took a rib from Adam. You see, He took that rib so that he was close to his heart and under his arm. When God brought the woman to Adam, He said in Hebrew, doggies! This is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. And for this cause a man shall leave his father and mother and become one with his wife. Oneness, if we realize it, what it is imitating is the Trinity. We have three personalities in one. And when we start talking about God creating male and female, and they shall be one, it is meant to look like the Trinity. Uh-oh. The other area where we have transcendence is we were given dominion over the whole creation. All right? We're different. We're in charge. I think about that. Wilson, my dog, has decided that when it snows, and I have to let him out, and it's cold and I'm freezing, after he does what dogs do when we let him out, he has to take another 5 minutes and lick snow. Now, you got to picture this. It's 6:30 in the morning. I've got my sleep shorts on and my coat. My legs are exposed. I'm in my slippers. I am freezing. And he's there going, Wilson, hurry up! And he goes, finally the other day I went out, I chased him back in the house. But I'm the master and I could chase him. He tries to be, but I'm bigger than he is, you know. And I was put in charge of him. Okay? That making sense? Okay. We have dominion over creation. So we transcend creation. We're different. If you notice, when he talked about what we had dominion over, fish in the sea, birds in the air, creatures on the earth, livestock. It's all there. We were given dominion. We transcend that. And it reflects God. Okay? That's one area there. Now, what did I do this time? You know.
Dominion over that.
What?
You don't have dominion over that.
Okay, we have transcendence. talk about the image of a dynamic being. God is the creator. First of all, that's how we know him. See, the reason why people wanted and distorted the origin of the species and evolution is that they wanted to have a source of creation that God didn't do. And so what we've got here with us, we know that in the beginning God created, and he is the creator God. Well, if God's the creator, and he's also a worker, he does things, you know, he intervenes in human history, lots of things we got there. Well, first of all, I want you to think about this as a creator. God has given us the power and the responsibility to have children, to reproduce people in the image of God. Now that one was a new one to me when I was studying this time, but I got to thinking, he's right. And here we are. It's an awesome responsibility that we have been given to create, if you will. We enter in with God to create other beings in the very image of God. Now, that's wonderful, but it also says a lot about the responsibility we're going to answer to God for how we raise our kids. Okay? So, we have that with us. Second thing, procreation. Our world has gone hog wild, pig crazy with sex. And they think it's just a biological function. It's not. It's not. Procreation is about God. It's about being like God. Why? God created human beings, and so we get to create human beings. That's not a biological function. It's an awesome responsibility. I love that. God entrusted the stewardship of the earth to humans. So we want to be active. Now, I want you to think about something. When he gave us the stewardship of the earth, we're supposed to take care of it. He meant for us to use it and employ it. Well, Adam and Eve were one thing when they were there, but as we have learned about the earth, about the way God made it, look where stewardship of the earth, how to mine metals, how to make metals, how to make engines, how to make bulldozers, how to make cars and rocket ships and houses and all sorts of stuff. That's what he said, subdue the earth, and that's what we've been doing. You think about that. And that is part of us being created just like God. Or think about what we heard this morning. Love that song. Love that song. But what are we doing? We create music. We create art. We have dominion and we're active and we do that. Now, this goes farther. God put Adam in the garden. He told him to cultivate it, take care of it. And so what happens is we find that that's a vocation. Hey, Charlie, Adam was a gardener. You ought to be proud. You're following your daddy's footsteps, you know. But what happens here is we do things and it is creative. I want you to think about the various things. Look across the congregation and the various things that we do. We have cooks, we've got truck drivers, we've got factory workers, and we've got housewives and college students and retirees and whatever. Just all of that creativity. Think about it. Think about all the creativity that is sitting here in our congregation. Talk about art. We're going to go in today's birthday party, and we're going to have some of those creations that Diane does every month at this time. The beautiful cakes. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I can't do that. I can't, I'll be honest with you, I can't even put whipped cream on top of a strawberry shortcake. It goes. But the creativity that we have and the vocations that we have, marvelous. This is going to sound like a tough one to you because you're going to jump ahead of the story. But the truth is, God has an image of absolute goodness. Now, when God finished creating humans, he didn't say it was good. He said it was very good. Say that. I'm very good. I'm very good, right? Okay. Now, however, we need to understand something because this anticipates where we're going. Goodness requires the capacity to choose between good and evil. Okay? If there's no choice, there's no such thing as good. If there's no choice, there's no such thing as love. Love has to be a choice. Okay? So that's where we are. Now, the other thing that we find is that, if you remember, we talked about God, how that he was a giver-servant in his relationships. Jesus made it very clear. I didn't come to be served, but to serve one another and give my life as a ransom for many. Okay? And God, if you look what he does, we speak about our good God and how that he gives and he serves. And think about us. What's the tagline for our church? Serving Christ by serving you. Why? We want to look just like Jesus. That's what we want to do right here. We want to just look like Jesus. And so in those love relationships, we do that. I want to talk to you about oneness because this is something, again, it's going to get distorted, but what it means that if you're going to have oneness, you have to have mutual submission. Now remember, men, and when he created male and female, they were not just equal, they were together. But it requires mutual submission and mutual service to each one. Okay? I don't have time to go into another illustration, so I'll let you fill in the blanks. But it requires a mutual submission. The Apostle Paul opens up his great discussion on marriage by saying, each of you should submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Ephesians 5:20. Okay? You see what he's speaking? That wasn't just incidental. Each of you should submit to the other out of reverence for Christ. Okay? Now, this next one is human dependency. See, God didn't create us because he needed to. God created us because he loved to. We weren't created out of necessity. We were created out of love. Okay. Now, having said that, God, doing that, God's independent. He doesn't need anything. He really didn't need us. He doesn't need anything at all. He is entirely self-sufficient. Now, but for us, we need food, we need shelter, we need others around us. We're dependent on those things. If you stop and think, what's one of the greatest punishments they have in prison? They put people in solitary confinement. Take them away from all human interaction. And guys go crazy on those things, literally, when that happens. Human mortality. I don't want to get into a long discussion on this because we can't. But we must understand that God said, and it makes sense, the day you eat of that tree, you will surely die. Humans were created mortal. But To stay alive, it must maintain its connection with God.
Amen.
That's what was necessary. What brought death was when they sinned, it broke the connection with God and broke the thing we have. Stop and think about it when we get over into the New Testament, where Jesus says that he that loves me and loves the Father has eternal life. What happened? We reestablished that connection. Okay? So, but we are mortal. First, and the next thing, we are susceptible to corruptibility. Now, God can't be tempted. He can't do wrong. But for us, in the design that we had to do this, we are vulnerable to evil and subject to corruption. And that doesn't need any explanation at all. Well, what happened was, one day Eve was in the garden, and the devil tempted her, said, "Has God said about the fruit?" And she ate the fruit. She gave it to Adam. They discovered they were naked. They hid themselves and were driven from the garden. Okay? That's the story of the fall in 3 seconds. What are the consequences of the fall? And again, I'm just going to run through these. The disruption of the image of God. Now, there's been a debate for centuries among theologians. Is man basically good, or is he basically evil? God created him good, but he fell. And the answer is, not is he basically good, or is he basically evil. He is basically fallen, and he's capable of either. Okay? A disruption of the communion with God. A disruption of the community of oneness. A disruption of the physical environment. The ground was cursed because of what happened. Finally, the disruption of the social environment, because oneness was no longer possible. Now we have the thing that we find. We are one generation in, and we have murder. We get the next generation with Lamech, who marries, 7 wives or something like that, and murders a bunch of men. Sex and violence disrupts the social order. Consequences. Well, I got to leave you there, because next week we're going to talk about the good news. We're going to talk about the doctrine of salvation. But we human beings are there. Humanity has fallen, and we are in need of a Redeemer. Let me pray, and then we'll do communion. Heavenly Father, we love you. We're thankful that we're on this side of the cross, because things look pretty hopeless to Adam and Eve. And we just want to say thank you so much. And we ask that you would be with us and help us to do our best to be the spitting image of our Father. We ask this in the name of the triune God. Amen.